of California, Sacramento. It's great to see you all here today. Thanks for joining us.
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, sorry, I just hit the recording in progress. So thank you for being a part of this. If you aren't familiar, and I think a lot of you are, NITECAP is really a nonprofit organization that advances nighttime management in U.S. cities. And we're lucky to be here with two nighttime economy managers, one from Sacramento, California, one from 1,500 miles away in the Midwest in Iowa City. And hopefully we have participants from all over the country. As I did mention, NITECAP really focuses on nighttime management in the US. And one of the things is I like to mention about where we're at in terms of proximity, NITECAP board members, as well as NITECAP members, get to converse with different individuals who are going through different challenges and struggles through all different cities. And so while some of our cities share commonality, some of them are very different. But today we get to talk to two experts about one kind of subject matter that I think sometimes gets often overlooked, which is communication. Just a little housekeeping stuff as well. If you are interested in joining NITECAP, please go to the NITECAP website. You can learn a lot about it, read some policy papers, join and see some newsletters. But I think today we're really here to talk about communication and why that's really important. And so as you probably saw when you joined and signed up for this, the title of it is Communication as Currency. It's insider tips to mobilize support and to drive impact. So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to hear some great insights from Joe and Tina. The format is going to be a little bit of just conversational. They love engaging with you as well. So if you have any opportunities that you want to ask questions or provide some input, I'll also have a little prompt where we'll ask a question of you to throw it in the chat. But we'll kind of break it down into a couple of different categories. And I'll mention those right before I turn it over to the two of them and allow them to introduce themselves. So the categories are really going to be, start off talking about higher level of communication and why that's important. We'll move into leadership and communication and the importance of that. We will also provide some specific examples that have been successful in Iowa City and in Sacramento, respectively. And then also, Joe and Tina will share some insider tips and takeaways. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Joe Reilly in Iowa City and Tina Lee-Vogt in Sacramento, California. And what I'll do, maybe Joe, I'll have you introduce yourself and then we'll have Tina go.
Absolutely. And like you're saying, we like to keep it candid, like to get to a little bit to know you. I'm Joe Reilly from the Iowa City Downtown District in Iowa City, Iowa. We like to use the name Iowa a lot in things as we name them here in this town. I am the Director of Operations and Nighttime Initiatives. So I'm doing that nighttime management, nighttime advocacy work inside of a business improvement district, which is a little different than my colleagues here around the United States, but we do have a lot of commonality and themes that we do. And I thought we'd loosen it up and just share maybe like an interesting fact, get to know you. And I'm really adamant about chili. It is fall here in Iowa City. And I don't want to give away too many things, but I've been perfecting a chili recipe for 4 or 5 years now based on my mother's chili recipe. And I'm just going to say some key takeaways for successful chili. You need to fry your peppers and onions with your ground beef before you transfer them into the crock pot. And you need 2 types of beans. I use Mrs. Grimes in the sauce and also black beans, kind of balances out the bean profile. That's not a real thing. I just made it up. But that's a real recipe. You can hit me up at joe@downtowniowacity.com if you want to learn more about chili. Tina, would you like to take it away?
Okay, that's going to be a hard act to follow. My name is Tina Lee-Vogt. I am the nighttime economy manager for the city of Sacramento. I've been doing this role for about 3 years officially. Prior to that, I managed the entertainment permit program. So I've been working in the nighttime space in the city of Sacramento for a little over a decade. But I've been with the city a long time, a very, very long time. And I've had a number of different roles. One of the things that I was able to do is for 10 years, I actually was a leadership instructor with the city of Sacramento. When I'm not kind of doing things in my job, actually, I'm part of a program. It's called Runnin' for Rhett. It is the largest youth fitness program in Northern California, but we have an adult fitness program. And as part of the adult fitness program, I am an officially certified Zumba instructor. And so once a month, I actually teach Zumba to a class of folks, about 20 people each month. And I will tell you right now, if you're looking for something and you're dealing with stress, the best way to address stress is to dance it out. And so sometimes just let the music get to you and dance the blues away. So that's one of the things I really love, is kind of doing the Zumba instruction. I found that some friends encouraged me to do it. And once I did it, I just loved it. So maybe at one of the summits, maybe I'll do a Zumba class. You never know. Just don't tell Jim that. No, we'll figure it out some other time.
Tina, do you ever say the rhythm is going to get you? Sorry, that's a
No,
deep cut.
but I do say must be jelly, because jam don't shake like that.
Love it.
Well, awesome. Thank you for the introductions. I'm looking forward to this engaging conversation. I think one thing too that might be good to mention, as Joe, you did mention you're with a PBID, Tina, you're with the city. I think one thing that's really helpful from this communication aspect is providing some tips and takeaways that people have that they can use within their office, whether they are a PBID, whether they work for a city, whether they work with a city. I think some of these communication practices, we want people to take those away and say, hey, how could I maybe embrace that in my own city and use that? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to first turn it over. I'm going to ask you both a question. And what I'll do, Tina, how about you start with this first question, then we'll turn it over to Joe. But this first one is really about communication. Why is communication important to your roles, and how do you use it effectively? Can you explain how you see communication being your currency?
I think communication is really important, because that's really how you build trust. That's how you build your relationship. And I think communication, it has to be two ways, and it really has to be so much. I think a lot of times people focus about communication, and it's about outreach, and it's about telling people things. But really, communication, if you're using it effectively, it's about how do you engage people and how you bring people in. And so I really use it to build trust. I also think that it's important that your communication is really open and transparent. I think a lot of people gatekeep, or they prejudge, or very prejudiced in terms of how they communicate. And a lot of times people think, oh, this person doesn't need to know this, so I'm not going to tell them this because it's not important to them. And I don't know how many times I found that I've shared something with someone just because I thought it might be helpful to them, and how really it mattered for them to be able to get the information in a timely manner. I think another thing that's important about communication is when you bring people in. Sometimes people will wait until something's done, or just when they think they need feedback from that person, where the sooner you can bring somebody into that process, the better. I think that for me, I always have a very open communication style. People always know that they can come to me. And people also understand I try to approach it in terms of what is the best way for that person to receive it. If it's someone who is more visual and likes to read something, I'm going to send them an email. If it's someone who needs to hear it, I'm going to give them a call or try to talk to them. So it's really understanding people's styles too. But for me, I think that open communication has allowed me to get a lot of information that I've needed to get my job done. And I've been able to provide information, especially to either the people that we work with and support, which is our businesses, or our stakeholders and our partners. I think the more that you have really good communication, the better your relationships are.
And if I could just piggyback on that, all those things, two-way communication, but back to communication as currency. In our roles, Tina, we're kind of holding space for everybody's thoughts and feelings about their nightlife business, the way maybe a business district is conducted, the way a city conducts themselves at night. And I like to think of it as we are the open ears that are taking in that information and storing it, and it accrues interest. Do you see what I just did there? And it accrues interest over time, because you're not sure where to park some of these pinch points for your businesses, or ideas, or things they want to explore. Maybe it's not the right time, but you're holding that with nighttime managers or nighttime management. You're kind of holding that, and then all of a sudden one day, this person or this organization or this new thing happens that transforms, like, oh, we can actually revisit this conversation again, and now's the time. And so you're constantly banking what people are telling you, and then you're dishing it back out later, but it may not be immediately done or satisfied. And like I liked your point about data. Always come with data and be data driven. Don't just go with what people feel are the things going on in nightlife. Really have some hard ways to guide it and tell that story about what is or isn't happening in your nightlife. And back to that point about trust. When people are telling you things, you're holding that for them, and they trust that you're going to take it somewhere and push it further. I think also in this role. And also sharing what you know and being transparent also empowers these businesses to be advocates of your nightlife and kind of get everybody lock and step in the same direction of where you want to go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think another key part of our job is being a liaison. I find a lot of times it's interpreting both ways. I work a lot with a lot of partners within the city of Sacramento that I work with. Also at my career in this role, I've had to work with police, code, and fire specifically, as well as our business improvement districts here in Sacramento. And a lot of times it's being able to communicate like from the city standpoint, especially when we have requirements or things people are supposed to be doing, and people don't understand, how do I work with the city? How do we get something done? And our job is to communicate so that people understand, hey, if you want to do something, a really good example is our office works a lot with people who want to change their liquor license or they want to change their entertainment permit conditions. And so we kind of tell them, hey, this is what the city is looking for you. So we're setting up what are the expectations going in, but also for city staff, because we're government people. We don't do businesses. So being able to kind of interpret, hey, this is what the business is going through. This is why they're trying to do this, because sometimes it's really easy, especially as a government agency, to just say the rules are the rules and this is how it is. But to be able to get them to understand more what the business is trying to do and maybe think a little differently in terms of, hey, how can we still be compliant, but still get the business where they're going? It helps if they understand what the business is trying to achieve. Because sometimes a business will come in and just say something like, I want to sell liquor longer. And of course, police is like, what the hell? What's going on with this? Because they don't understand what that impact is. But if people don't explain why do they want to stay open longer, or why do they think they can do something with fewer restrictions and still stay safe, that's really helpful to be able to kind of build that bridge. So really good communication in our role is important to build that bridge and to kind of get that better understanding on either side, because sometimes it's just about almost being an interpreter between the two different sides, that they understand what the goals are for each entity and try to figure out how we can all get there together.
We straddle the two realms really, and that's why this role is created, is to, like you're saying, bridge. And sometimes it's just walking people with their city cap on is very like, well, the code states this, so you have to start asking questions like, well, what is our policy about liquor sales? Is there a certain zoning in this area? And you have to like slowly step through like, what are the actual barriers? Is there a barrier at all? I do feel like, especially in my position, sometimes there is I want to jump to shutting this down or no, and not really exploring those conversations. And it goes back to communication styles. And sometimes over email is not the best way to get a candid response, especially if people were in a government role, but also having people sit in the same room together and getting a conversation around a table and kind of demystifying the people who run the pubs, clubs, bars with the people who are very 9 to 5, most likely wearing their suit and tie, and just like, hey, we all want to work together. But I think sometimes getting people away from their email, away from a screen, and seeing a face just humanizes the situation a little bit better. And I feel like it's easier for people to come to a middle when all that kind of throws away. But back to, sorry, communication style, I do want to touch on, especially with people who operate nightlife venues, they're not emailing, they're not checking. I mean, they're usually not checking emails. They are usually texting. Sometimes I have a few property owners and specifically bar owners who I know I could probably just walk down in the middle of the day where the owner is like doing the books and just stop in and talk to them face to face. But you kind of get to know, you have to get to know your people in your nightlife, how they like to be communicated with. And then like, oh yeah, I remember this person, I should just stop in because they're not going to check their phone. They're not going to check their email either.
Well, and I think you're right too about the pop in and meeting people where they're at figuratively and literally. Um, you know, my career with the city is really long. And one of the things that always sticks out is I used to work in the Department of Finance. And our finance director used to always tell us, I worked in the budget office, and he would tell us as budget analysts, go to the departments. We're a large city and we have a lot of people that do not work in City Hall. Well, City Hall's downtown, people to drive in and park. And he would tell us, get in your car, go to them, because it's easier for you to go to them, for them to come to you. You're kind of in their space, so they're a little bit more comfortable. So he really talked about the importance of sometimes, especially when you're a government or you're something, you want to make people come on high. You want to make them come to City Hall. You want to have them come to you, or this kind of power thing. But sometimes that little bit of hey, can I meet you on site? Or one of the things that our office does a lot of is especially like, 80 million meetings. And then you do this special meeting that requires some special time that people have to come to the special place. If you want to meet with some people sometimes, we have a ton of PBIDs in the city of Sacramento. When is your meeting? Can we pop into when you're doing something because it's more convenient? So again, it's the style and it's what's the best way to communicate with someone. Definitely in person. I think a lot of times, even when we do something like this, a lot of people like the virtual meetings because they're easier. But the problem sometimes with virtual meetings when you're talking about something deep are people are multitasking. So they're not really as engaged. You miss the whole thing with body language. You're just not as involved as when you do something that's in person. So really understanding, depending on the topic, sometimes it's appropriate for an email. Sometimes it's more appropriate for a face-to-face. Sometimes it's a quick phone call. The first sergeant that I work with, I think we got most of our work done when he came on board, and he would just call and say, hey, Tina, it's Lane. Do you have a few seconds? And he would just do a pop-up. I talk a lot with our captain, and so much of what we do gets so done when he just sends me a quick text and says, hey, Tina, do you have 5 minutes to chat? And then Bryce and I get on the phone and we just chat about it. It's not a big planned out, looking at people's schedules meeting. It's quick and to the point, but it's understanding those different approaches depending on what you're talking about to be really effective to communicate with someone.
Before we move on, I want to touch on one thing that you highlighted, Tina, about power dynamics and how things are coded, even when you don't realize they're coded. Who made the meeting invite? Where are they meeting? Is that a space that people are unfamiliar with or that is intimidating? There are times where we're trying to advocate with our businesses and it's maybe not on the radar of the city. So the best way to do it is it's not an agenda item at a city council meeting, but we're like, hey, just so you know, this has kind of become a pinch point for our community, and you go into public comment. Well, who's been to public comment before? You've probably seen like wild YouTube videos. It's a very formal setting. They're all like up ahead of you, the city councilors. And so, you have to either ease them into that space and walk them through it and like handhold, like, I'm going to go to city council with you and here's what we're going to say and here's how it's going to go. And it's really no big deal. But people don't realize those, hey, we're having a meeting at City Hall. That could be very intimidating for somebody who's never been to City Hall. And so you find those neutral ground territories where to meet up, meet at your business. And just think about that when you're setting up where you're meeting and what that symbolizes. You may not even know you're doing it.
Thank you for this great discussion already. There's one thing that you both mentioned a little bit of, and that was trust. And I think that that'll kind of move us to the next topic about leadership and communication. I think there's a quote that is more or less, trust is built in drops and lost in buckets. And I think both of you probably agree a little bit with that and kind of the roles that you do have in terms of building that trust and understanding how that trust can be utilized and how that trust can be really a conduit for leadership. So let me move towards that second aspect of this, and that's a little bit more leadership. So for both of you, and maybe I think I started with Tina last time, so I'll start with Joe here. Why is effective communication vital for leadership?
It's trust. It's value. It's valuing the people in a conversation. It's a two-way conversation. I think to be an effective leader, you're not just talking at people, you're talking with people, you're in a dialogue. For instance, when we do our restaurant and bar forums here in downtown Iowa City, there's usually a feeler that goes out before the agenda goes out. Hey, is there anything that you would like covered in our agenda? I kind of already have some like main pillars of our conversation, but maybe there's something that I'm not aware of that needs to be discussed and brought up. But it's empowering those people to be at the table. And when I started this role, it was very much like drive the agenda down. And then the more I opened it up to what do you want to talk about, the more engagement I got, the more people showed up because they felt valued. They weren't being talked at or talked down to. It was, across the table. So I think that's one why effective communication is vital, to be seen as a trusted leader, to trust them that they are also right there with you and they want to make the best that they can for your city's nightlife or that district's nightlife. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of the main bullet point it's amount of trust. And what was the point you said, the drops and then lost in a bucket? That's amazing. I've never heard that before, but I'm going to probably take that.
I think for me, one of the things that's really important about really good communication is that really being able to have people understand really clear expectations and visions. I think one of the things that I like to think is one of my strengths as a leader is really establishing a really good vision of what we're trying to accomplish. Because I think a lot of times people just think activity is production, and it's not. You're not being productive if you're just moving. Your sharks just move, but they aren't productive all the time. So I think it's really important that you really have really good communication so people clearly understand what are expectations, what are we doing, what are we going, and people really, you know, really appreciate that in terms of when you're a really good leader. I think good leaders also are good listeners. I think a lot of times people really fail to understand that communication isn't just about saying what you want to say, it's about really understanding and receiving. And it's about really understanding and receiving. I mean, I think sometimes people just listen so that they can respond. They listen so that I got to come back. I'm just ready for my answer. And they're not really listening to understand someone's frustration or understanding really their perspective or really listening to understand what are their priorities. And so, really good leaders are really listening to understand the subtlety, the nuances, the challenges, the different issues and things that are coming across when someone is communicating with you, not just the words that someone may be saying. Because someone may be saying all the right things, but maybe they're not really following through with what they do. Sometimes people aren't saying much, but there's so much impact behind what they're not telling you that if you're a really good listener, you can actually kind of sense that if you're really paying attention and you're really following up. I think also communication is transparency. I think that that's what leads to trust is that when you're communicating with people about not just when things are great, but when things are not going so well or when things aren't moving. I think sometimes my biggest frustration sometimes with communication is people don't tell you, hey, you know what, we're still working on it or we're doing something or there's just a void. Communication really kind of keeps that connection going. And so with good leaders, you're really connected with people. And when you communicate with them throughout a process, even if things maybe have hit a wall or something is happening, people appreciate that because they know what's going on. My biggest frustration for me, and this is why I always tell people communication is currency, is when I have to chase down information. Nothing frustrates me more than when I have to go to somebody and like, hey, 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 because it's just like, can you keep me in the loop? I shouldn't have to chase information, especially about something that impacts me. And I think a lot of people feel that way. So people want to know what's going on, especially if there's something that impacts them, and people don't want to chase that information. And again, too, good leaders understand the different players and who they're working with. I think that sometimes people think that consistency is doing something exactly the same with every single person. And it's really not. That's not what consistency is. Consistency is kind of maintaining, for me, I try to maintain the same message. I try to maintain the same brand and the same vision. However, I understand who needs to hear it in different ways and make sure that I'm telling them in a way that's important for them. Because there may be some aspects to the vision or what I'm saying that's more important than other aspects of it. And so I hit what's important to them. And so it's really being able to understand that. And that's how you really build really good collaboration. And I think when you're a really good communicator, then people will give it back to you. So I think that's where that leadership comes in.
If I could just jump on about the transparency, and I always, every time we talk about transparency, I always think about this thing in my previous career. It was called Know the Score. And so I guess maybe that should have been my interesting fact. So I used to work in aviation customer service for a decade. Stats, percentages, bags on, bags off, on time. What we found is when we communicate what our goal and our vision is and what the current state of play is, whether that's statistics or whether that's like city code or, barriers in the city code and what we're striving for, if everybody knows what the current rules are and what we're going towards, people, it moves in a positive direction quicker, faster, because everybody's on board. And it's back to that trust and that you're empowering folks to be their own advocate, to advocate for the greater good. But yeah, transparency, absolutely, and knowing the score, I think is a huge driver that helps, your communication as a leader.
and I think building relationships and building that trust. I mean, there are so many things I've been able to accomplish in my long city career because I had established really good, trusting relationships. Early in my career, I worked where I did change management for a big IT project. And the person who did it before me, I'll just be honest, was an idiot. And we had a whole city of over 3,000 FTEs that we needed to train. And this person had got one lab for us to train people in. We're like, what the heck? Because of the relationship that my team had built with people, we were able to like find computer labs all throughout the city. And people did that not because we said, we're part of this IT project, you need to give us your lab. We had built these really great relationships, and people did it because we were asking them to do it. And they knew that they could trust us. And we also knew that in doing that, we also had something to do for them. So, like, as we got the labs, we made sure that we were partners with them. We made sure that we didn't book things that we didn't need. We made sure that we communicated with them what we were doing and we're really clear. It was really a relationship of really great communication both ways. What did we need? What could they do? And it wasn't a quid pro quo. It wasn't like, okay, you do this for me, I'll do this for you. It was more, how do we always help each other get to whatever goal we're trying to get to? And so really being able to have that reputation and that relationship, you'll find in a million different ways. There may be something that you need, and someone will step up because they know you and they trust you and they want to help you get where you're trying to go because you've built this really great relationship with you. I think when we hosted the summit earlier this year, so much of what we were able to do in terms of producing the summit was based on the relationships that John and I had with so many of our internal stakeholders with the city, as well as our businesses that helped us host so many of our offsites. And that was really based on long-term relationship building.
I'm really happy that this is recorded because I would be over here frantically taking notes about all these tips to be a better communicator and a better leader here for myself. So we're at the halftime show here, and I want to obviously, I think the two of you have mentioned this too, that you like to engage with people, not just talk at people. So I wanted to just provide everyone who's attending, if you don't mind participating with a little question here, you could put it in the chat. And there's no wrong answers. There's probably plenty of right answers, which is why it's maybe a good prompt. But I know that we have people on the call from different departments, whether they're city departments, PBIDs, different places around the country. So hopefully this question will be respective for all of you. So let's say an area with a busy business district in your city has experienced a rise in positive pedestrian activity. However, this also brings challenges to your city, such as late night noise and negative behaviors. Your supervisor has assigned you the task of implementing improvements. Which departments or stakeholders or anyone else would you communicate with to help address these issues? So we'll give it just a couple seconds to add anything into your chat. I think Tina and Joe will probably see some of these populate as we go, as people have examples of who they would communicate with. And then as some of those populate, we can take a pause and talk about some of those. But as that occurs, maybe we'll move on to the third quarter, if you will, if we're after halftime here, to talk a little bit about specific examples. I think you've provided a great overview of how you see communication, some of the value that you see using it as your currency, and then also how you utilize communication in your leadership, in your leadership styles in your respective cities, as well as with NITECAP. But I'd like to dive in a little bit to maybe a lengthier discussion for each of you about some specific examples about how you have used leadership to create some wins in each of your cities. So Tina, how about we start with you on this one? Can you provide a specific example of how your communication and leadership skills helped you accomplish a win?
Probably, I think one of the ones we had was a big win for us is we had a promoter or an event organizer who had done a number of special events in our space. So they would come in, they were from the Bay Area here in California. They would come to Sacramento and they would do a special event in a kind of developing area on the street. They would do these huge concerts in what was our rail yards area. And they'd been doing that for a while. And they really wanted a more permanent location. So they had reached out to our office and they'd wanted to find a location that was outdoors where they could do a space for an event for up to like 10,000 people. So the first location that they picked was just horrible. It was a site of a former burned building. It had rebar as tall as a man. It was just horrible. We had connected him with fire because we wanted fire to go out and look at the site first. And that's when they said, this doesn't work. But what was nice about that was the communication was one, we wanted to connect him with fire first before he started making plans and spending money because we kind of knew it wasn't going to work and we wanted to build that relationship with the organizer and our fire department. And then when our fire department came out, what happened was we were able to build that bridge for them. So they were able to say, hey, this site is crap, and it was, but what kind of site do you need? How can we help you find a site that's better? So we found another site down the road that they were able to use that was great. It worked well. It was a temporary parking lot. It was big. It was fenced. It was great. So we had this site on a pretty busy street. One of the things that was really good that showed to our relationship is there were so many different players we had to involve. We had to involve police because there were going to be street closures. Because there were street closures, we had to have traffic. We had to have fire because it's this big kind of open parking lot that we needed to make sure that was set up safely. So I really do think that because of the relationship that we built, I think because we in our office served as the conduit for consistent communication between the organizer, between our business, our city departments, between the business improvement district, we were really able to get it done. And so what was great is we took this temporary lot at the corner of 7th and Richards in Sacramento, right in front of, by the way, a CHP admin office with multiple street closures. And we had a concert with a popular mainstream Latino artist for about 10,000 people. And I think what was great about that was, again, the communication. We didn't have any issues with it. Police love working with the organizer because they were really good. And because I think we set the tone for making it a positive thing for the city as well as a positive interaction with the organizer. One of the things we were able to do with really good relationship building was originally our traffic engineer was going to require this operator to have to spend $40,000 on a transportation management plan for something that would only occur 3 to 4 times a year. But because of our relationship, we were able to talk to him. Police was willing to work, which is, again, that relationship building where the police said, we'll work on traffic management so that they didn't have to spend that extra money. They coordinated with police to get extra services. So again, it was a win-win all the way around. But it really was about great relationships from the beginning, because I think if they didn't have trust in our office, it just would have been a no. There just would have been no way that anyone would have even discussed anything with this organizer. But I think us saying that we believe in this organizer, us facilitating the communication, and us having really strong relationships to make sure that we got it all together, I think is what made that happen.
And Joe, do you mind? I just want to follow up with Tina on one little question before I go to you. Tina, I think on that's a great example. And I love that story. And your office being a part of economic development, I think you with your leadership saw that this producer had done some certain things in the past. They were a great operator. You use your leadership to help them along the way. Can you provide just an example of maybe what they're doing now and how they've wanted to invest further in Sacramento?
So one of the things that has happened since they had their event is that they wanted to have a more permanent position here in the city of Sacramento. So just this month, earlier, they reached out to us and said there was a potential live music venue in our East Sacramento area that had been proposed, but the project had stalled and the original investor kind of pulled out. So the organizer that did the event in the parking lot actually just recently purchased the business. And so they're going to have a permanent location in one of our industrial areas where they're going to take an old warehouse space and make it a live music hall. So that's another way where, again, it kind of established a longer term relationship where not only did they want to do business, we're going from an occasional event in our rail yards area to a permanent location in our river district. Now they're actually building a live music hall in our Power Inn area.
Thank you for that. And Joe, I'd love to hear from you as well about a specific example how you've used communication.
Well, I'm here at Iowa City, Iowa, which is home to the University of Iowa. Go Hawkeyes. We are also a county seat. We have a lot of resources here that are either given from the university, the county. We are very thought of as a source for multiple people around Eastern Iowa as it relates to social services resources. So about a few years ago, we had several different entities who had either grant funded or already a budget for things that relate to harm reduction in our nightlife. And kind of back to that whole, being a bank for people's thoughts and feelings and what they're advocating for, and taking that currency in and giving it interest, is that there's all these different entities here in the Iowa City area who are doing the work, who aren't aware of each other or what they're already maybe duplicating or already covering up. Things like, one of our organization's community was given the work to do 988 services that cover all of Eastern Iowa, and also then dispatch, if it's here in Iowa City, on-site community crisis. We have a detoxifying rehabilitation unit. So, a divergent surface that instead of going to jail for intoxication, you can detox there for the night. Things like people who work with a rape victim advocacy program who can be that post-traumatic event counseling services. So there's all these things out there that I've, in my position, I'm sitting back like, do you not all know you're all part of each other and this is all great, but how do let's all share the same vehicle to get to the destination? So we partnered with the University of Iowa, our local public safety, and these entities to get this resource signage into our restrooms in our downtown bars and restaurants and venues. So I'm just going to post the Instagram post there. This is a couple years ago. We're actually revisiting the signage next week because some things have changed and updated. But one, getting everybody at the table, they're all advocating for harm reduction in some different way, shape, or form. But let's share the cost of printing, this frame, this high durability frame that, it's really hard to pop off and it takes a lot of damage and can stay in a bathroom for a long time. And then also getting that same information to frontline staff in a smaller laminated form that sits by their point of sale system. And then so that not only employees are aware of what's available as it relates to people experiencing crisis in nightlife, but they can refer our visitors to. But just like getting everybody around the table, we're all knowing the score, and we're all going to go in the same direction here under this, signage poster. And that also getting them into the businesses is also part of that trust that I have built with these late night bars and clubs, and trusting me, hey, if we get this in your bathroom, will you install it and hang it up, and will it be there? Absolutely. But you have to have that relationship that you built over time to be like, hey, you folks who are giving these resources probably don't know these 25 plus liquor license holders. I do. I can get them connected and bring it all together under one, kind of product there. Yeah.
No, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. Those are some great specific stories about how you utilize communication and gotten wins in each of your respective cities. Maybe what we'll do, I know Andrew added something to the chat, and maybe we can look at that as well, Joe. Maybe we can answer that towards the
Oh,
end.
yeah. Was there any pushback from late night businesses about posting this information? No, it would be very strange if someone were to say like, no, I don't want information about suicide hotlines or detoxifying, services here, or people who are experiencing crisis, that want divergent services. They don't want public safety responding to their crisis. They want actual, social worker type person to come meet them where they're at. So there's no pushback, but there's just also, over time, stuff falls off walls, gets punched into walls in a college town, so you have to revisit the conversation, refurbish those pieces of literature, any frames that maybe went missing or things like that. But as long as there's the method we're using to do this refurbishing that we're starting with next week is, so I sit on a coalition with the university for their alcohol harm reduction, and we are taking funds that are generated off of alcohol sales in athletic stadiums at the University of Iowa, and 30% of those sales go to a harm reduction fund. And then I've, asked, hey, can we steward some money for the downtown district to help push those into our downtown businesses in things like this.
Cool. Thank you for that. Thanks for the question, Andrew. Anyone else, please feel free to chime in with some great questions. We have some time towards the end as well. And we've got one additional area before we get to those questions. And I think this is a great area where I look forward to hearing what you have to say. And it's really about some insider tips and takeaways for individuals on this call. And so obviously, Joe, working with kind of the PBID in Iowa City, and Tina, with your experience with the city of Sacramento in terms of communication and some of the stuff that you've talked about, what are some things that really people could take away and utilize and maybe have for their own vision and goals as they move forward with whatever projects they're working on? What things can they use and take away?
Can I go first? Sorry. No. So it kind of goes back to that open question you posed to folks, and maybe not specifically stakeholders, but I think sometimes there are snags or pinches in our nightlife that really require a type of storytelling. I always try to say storytelling is more powerful than just having conversations, and that may require inviting all those stakeholders to an in-person visit of that district or that area at that time. And hey, this is an open invite. I know it's maybe off hours, but I think it would be most impactful. One, being in person, there's so many things that are left off in an email: sight, sound, smell, the feeling. The things you're seeing and how they happen in real time get lost in an email or a text or a phone call, and you can visually, soak it. You can soak it in person, and exactly what people are talking about. So you're inviting maybe those people from zoning. If there's people who are, making law or voting on law in your city, maybe a city councilor or two. Residents of that area who maybe go to, they're in bed by 7 p.m., but I heard a sound one night and I think this has happened, invite them in. Let's go see it all together, all at once. Like what, and do a little post-mortem after it. And like, what did we actually experience? What is actually happening? So I always think sometimes you need to get off your computer and your phone, and you need to just go experience it to really know what the truth is.
The one thing that I am notorious for, and I think it serves me well, I am an over communicator. And I have been, since I've been working in the nighttime space, I have had, I would probably say, at least a half dozen police captains that I've worked with. When I was doing entertainment permits, I had 3 supervisors during my tenure. One of the things I always tell people is, I will send you emails about things that you may be like, why am I sending that to you? And I always kind of tell people, it's like, if it's sending it to you, it's for your information. I either need an action, and I'll be very specific about what you need to do, but it's to you. I might copy you on something. That's more for your information. I have found that has served me well, because a lot of times what happens is you assume someone doesn't need to know something. And more often than not, what someone tells me is, thank you for sharing that. That was really helpful because. So a lot of times over communicating is really good. It makes people feel, it gets them more engaged. And especially if you're trying to make sure that people feel part of a process. I don't know how many times I've worked on something where people will tell me about something that they're doing, like a policy change or a program update or something. And then they tell me right when they're about to implement it. And I'll ask a question like, did you think about this? What? What are you talking about? And it's like, had you told someone earlier, they could have told you something, because there's so many people involved in so many processes that you really want to bring people in as early as you can. So over communication, I always tell people, I tell you a lot of things. Take what you need. You can let the rest go by. But I think people appreciate knowing what's going on. And again, they don't have to chase the information. And the number of times, especially with folks that often get neglected. My fire folks consistently have told me, thank you for telling us that. It's really good to know. Our code team, it's nice because they're out in the field, and then suddenly no one's telling them about something, and then someone asks them about it, and they're like, well, we didn't know that was going on. So it's really bringing them into the mix. It's telling your businesses about things that are going on. So over communication is really a key. And also, we said it before, but I will say it a million times. It's really about your recipient. So many people get so into their heads about what I'm trying to tell people, what I want to say. It's not about you. Because if you put something out there a million times and it doesn't land, then you just failed. Because you need to make sure that whatever you're saying is received and understood. And if what you're communicating isn't received and understood, then you didn't communicate it well. So you need to really figure out what's the best way to get that information so that person receives it. I spoke a little earlier about when I did an IT change management program. One of the things I would always be told is just send it in an email, Tina. Just send it in an email. We have a city of people in cars and trucks. There is no one sitting around waiting for an email from me to tell them that there's an update to the payroll system. So it was really about how do you connect with those people that aren't always looking at their emails or doing different things. So again, really think about what does the recipient need to know? What's the most important thing? Making sure also how you send the message. I always tell people to have a key message and keep it like elevator short. Because some people, like, how many of us have gotten the email that is, 4 or 5 paragraphs, and you have to get to the 6th paragraph before you understand what they're saying?
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's the thing that's really important about, again, the recipient. So it's really important to figure out how that recipient receives it and making sure that they get the message in a way that's concise, that gives them the facts they need, and is given to them in a way that they can best receive it. So those are the tips that I have, is over communicating and just focusing on that recipient.
Kind of jumping on the email thing too. Sometimes when it has to go out in an email and there's like a lot of attachments and resources, especially for folks that are in nightlife, like I always try to do in my email, like bold and italicized, just high level chunks. And then there's the whole description below that. So it's like, oh, okay, my eye goes here. This is important. Then if I need to read more, I can read more from there. But I also want to just talk about like communication doesn't always yield instant results. Meaning
Yes.
I've literally had some people to F off to my face. Like, I've been in this biz for 30 years. I don't need you. I know what I'm doing. Like, okay, great. Sometimes there's no payoff, but you got to keep that broadcast. You got to keep broadcasting that signal out there, whether that's your email, whether that's they're still invited to your forums and meetings. You're still, maybe there's nothing for them to share, but sometimes after 5 or 6 years, they show up or they have a question about something that you're sharing out and they're engaged. Maybe they were just reading it, they just had no questions or feedback previously. So don't be discouraged if it's no reply back. But the ability that you're either offering spaces through meetings that they can attend or not, or they can reply back to you or not, or just stopping in and saying hello and they have nothing to share. Don't be offended, right? It's about the recipient, as Tina was saying. It's not about you.
Thank you for those takeaways. I think we can all utilize those, grasp those, and see those as we continue to work in our respective cities. I wanted to also mention one thing too that I think is really helpful from a NITECAP perspective, is that I think a lot of people on the call are involved in NITECAP. If you're not, there's ways that communication is done amongst different NITECAP members all across the country. So if there are certain questions, whether it be about communication, whether it be about a very esoteric kind of thing that you're doing in your city, whether it's innovations in transportation, how you're managing late night crowds, how you're working through a security or safety plan. There's a lot of different things through a NITECAP, alcohol licensing, things of that nature. But being a part of NITECAP, there are methods, whether it be through a WhatsApp or speaker series or a newsletter, that information is communicated. So it's always great to be able to hear and share that stuff almost in real time. And before we move on, if there's any additional questions, I know that Nicole posed a different question in here. I wanted to see if both of you had some perspective on what she is asking, and I can just read it aloud, and maybe we'll start with Joe and then go to Tina. But Nicole mentioned, when you talked about the multiple avenues of communication to serve your styles, for example, email or text calling, how do you professionally navigate establishing boundaries with others for encouraging communication during office hours?
I've had this happen a lot. So obviously, it's after 5 p.m., you get a text or a phone call. more often than not, if it is something that absolutely has to be addressed, that is probably a public safety emergency type thing, nothing that we can solve for them. Are there things maybe that are in the structure or the code or neighbor to neighbor that need to be established later? Absolutely. So acknowledge that it's happening, whatever that is, that stakeholders reach out to you. If there is something you can quickly refer them to as, hey, this is the difference between 911 and the public safety non-emergency line. So if you do see someone dispatch to the area to go check something out, here's the number. Obviously, if it's a serious emergency, that's 911. So acknowledge that it happened. Give them any resource that they may find handy in that moment, or sometimes they might be just looking for a contact of their neighbor next door. But then if there's a follow-up, you say, I will follow up with you tomorrow or later this week, and we can set something up. But sometimes there are people who are very, they want solutions immediately right now, but honestly, we are setting and molding the circumstances, but we are not, like, I have the ability to stop this right now in this moment. That's not what we do. And so you just have to acknowledge that, yes, it's happening to you. Maybe I'm sorry that it happened. Here's where you can go right now immediately, and then I will follow up later. You got to set that boundary. Like, we're not calling, we're not texting at 1:30 a.m. I know it sounds like it may seem like crazy right now, but there's nothing I can absolutely solve for you right now in this moment. We'll just kind of pick it up tomorrow.
One of the things I'm really clear about is I just tell people what's my preferred way of communicating with me in the most effective way. And sometimes it's saying things like, you know what, I respond best to this. So I think sometimes that's the problem with the kind of immediate response, as people think if I text you, you're going to text me right back. If it's not an emergency, don't text them. I mean, it sounds mean, but if you don't need to text them right back, don't text them right back. Because to me, what I think it does is it sets the behavior of, if I text them, they're going to respond. So I kind of respond within my boundaries. And I'll kind of say, like, hey, you know what works best for me is if you contact me within these hours. Or I'll tell people, like, I'm a person who, don't leave me no long ass voicemail. I'm not listening to it, because about halfway through, I'm wondering who won Dance with the Stars. I'm not paying attention. But if you send me a quick text at an appropriate time, if I get a text at 1 a.m., I'm responding at 1 a.m. I'm responding when I start my workday, unless it's an emergency or a crisis, because I do tell our public safety folks and team that they can contact me after hours. But if it's like a business owner, if I don't need to respond at that time, I don't, because it sets the behavior. And I'm just really polite, but very firm about it, and say, this is the best way for me to respond to you. And sometimes I explain to them why. One of the things that used to happen is when I used to work prior to this position, in addition to doing entertainment permits, I had other things I did. And so I would have people that would do the drop by, where they would come by the office and expect me to drop everything and run to meet with them. And I didn't have time for that. And so I just told them, if you drop by the office, I may or may not be able to talk to you. And really set the standard of, I didn't drop things when people came by. If they came by the office and they had made an appointment, I had told them, because I had set that standard. But I also told them why it was good for them. So it might be like, you know what, if you contact me after hours, I'm not at my office, so I don't have the resources I need to assist you. If you contacted me during my regular office hours, then I have the resources to assist you with whatever you're trying to do. So trying to make them understand why these are your preferences and this is why it helps them. But it's tough, because we do live in this kind of environment where people think, and especially if you're in a position where you're in a PBID or you're in a government position, and people think, oh, you work for me, you're just supposed to be responsive. But realistically, too, you're trying to do other things. So I would, again, set what my preferences are, kind of explain why you have those preferences, and then try to kind of change the behavior in terms of, if you don't really need to respond to them, don't, because if you continue to respond to them outside of those boundaries and office hours, then they're going to think that that's okay for them to do that.
And having a structured meeting, I think is more valuable to that person. Maybe they want that immediate response, but if it's that important, let's chunk out a time. We got 30 minutes. I'm going to come to you, and we are valuing this space and time. If it is just in passing as you're going from meeting to meeting, yeah, you're probably not going to take notes. It's going to lose its value. They're going to feel brushed off, but that's not, I think there's a value. If it's that important, you really need to set up a meeting and meet them on their terms too.
Great. Thank you for answering that question. And for this speaker series, we are down to the 2-minute warning of our proverbial football game. I want to thank Joe in Iowa City, go Hawkeyes, and Tina Lee-Vogt here in the city of Sacramento. I wanted to give you a little bit of space as well, maybe for any closing remarks or anything like that. But I think going over the communication, the leadership and communication, providing those specific examples, and then some really key tips and takeaways that you found to be successful in your careers is really helpful for us to hear. But I wanted to give you an opportunity before we close out.
I would love to have folks in the chat. I know we had tried to kind of bring people out talking about the stakeholders that they may work with. I would love to hear from anyone in the chat just a couple of things. One is if there's any takeaways that you got from this that you might want to use and implement. And then if you thought, as we talked, if you could identify any key stakeholders that you think you either want to better connect with or that you're realizing are your key partners that you want to continue to develop your relationship with. Because I think that's one of the most important parts of communication is really understanding your stakeholders and understanding kind of how you can work with them more effectively, because especially in this role, it's a lot of how you support others to help them accomplish their goals. So I would love to get some feedback on any takeaways that folks have or anything in terms of them identifying any key stakeholders that they may have that they think they might want to try to connect with.
I would love to see that as well. It would be a good indication if we landed the plane correctly, as I like to say, met our goals. So if anybody, like Tina said, had some things that struck them, please just freely drop them in the chat. I'd love to hear what went well for you. That helps us for our future speaker series.
Yeah, absolutely. And in addition to that, we're going to end this here soon. So if they do have any of those additional ones, they can email us at info@nitecap.org, or specifically, Joe, if you wanted to drop your email in the chat, or Tina, if you wanted to as well, they could contact us directly as well. But on behalf of NITECAP, I wanted to say thank you we hit 58 minutes out of the 60 here with some great information. We look forward to bringing these back every quarter. One other thing, too, from the people that are listening, not only some feedback about this, but also if there's something that you think would be beneficial to hear from NITECAP, whether that be from a nighttime economy manager or office, or if you provide a service that is beneficial and you do work with offices or with PBIDs, it might be important for us to be able to have them on to share their perspective so we can further advance U.S. nighttime economy management across the United States. So again, my name is John Adair on behalf of NITECAP and Joe Reilly from Iowa City and Tina Lee-Vogt from Sacramento, California. Thank you all for joining us and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. You did a great job, as always, moderating. So thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Bye.